I was so glad I had a sales contract. When my client called, we had a serious problem. The white shorts from China were badly stained and they needed replacements now. 4,700 shorts ordered, over 50,000 US dollars. And it all goes back to one sales contract to keep me alive. Today, I'll show you the 4 parts I put into a China sales contract to reduce risk and how each one holds the factory accountable when something goes wrong. Now that call landed on me hard because I had no idea how many were affected. And you see, those shorts were part of a costume. Somebody paid months in advance to participate in the biggest Caribbean carnival, and they were flying in for one weekend of the year to party hard. So what do you do when the goods have already left China and the clock is ticking? My name is Duane Scott. For over 13 years, I have been hands-on in China, helping CEOs and business owners build their own supply chain systems. And I have learned that an order without a sales contract is like having a phone without a charger. They go hand in hand. Here's the hidden truth. A sales contract does not guarantee that your order will be perfect. Its job is to make the factory accountable to what both sides agreed to. Because once the factory signs and stamps those requirements, there is a clear standard for the product, quality, delivery, and responsibility if something goes wrong. So where does a good supplier relationship start breaking down? Let me introduce you to Frank. He is the owner of the Shorts factory. And here we are in Shisha developing the pre-production samples. Now, communication will naturally evolve into WeChat messages, video calls, sample photos, any last-minute changes from the customer. And individually, all of those conversations may be perfectly clear until when the problem comes up. Things change, people forget, and two people remember the same conversation differently. I'm sure that's happened to you before. But writing is what survives that. And this is why the contract gathers those separate decisions into one document that both sides acknowledge. I learned that one the hard way years before Frank with another supplier. I skipped that page entirely. No signed contract, just good faith. Then we were 2 months behind schedule, my deposit already gone, and I had nothing in writing to point at, nothing to stand on. Let's fast forward. At the core of my sales contract today are 4 parts. Identity, who is legally making your goods? Specification, what did they agree to produce? Consequence, what happens if they miss it? And confidentiality, what they cannot share. Now, identity and specification together are really your manufacturing agreement. Now, one note before we start to build it. This is what has worked for me, and I offer it here as a general education, not legal advice. So, if informal communication creates risk, how do you build a sales contract both sides can clearly follow? The old mindset is, I trust the supplier with a verbal agreement, and a handshake and high five is good enough. The new mindset is, trust and documentation are on opposite sides. A good relationship tells me I want to work with this factory. The sales contract tells both of us exactly how we are going to work together. And when something goes wrong, and eventually something will, we simply go back to what we agreed to. And you see, the factory, they also read it the same way. Once Frank stamped those pages, he was not agreeing to trust me. He was agreeing to a standard he could be measured against. So, what belongs on those pages starts with who you are actually dealing with. And here's the approach that I take. The first part is identity. You got to put the seller's official registered business name on the contract, exactly as it appears on their business license in Chinese and English. Include the unified social credit code and the manufacturing address shown on that license. Then have the company apply its official CHOP, that means its stamp and seal, and an authorized signature to every page. Ideally, this is from the factory owner. That gives you stronger evidence that the factory accepted the complete agreement. Frank, he stamped and signed all 7 pages. But a confirmed company still tells you nothing about what you actually bought. So the second part is specification. This is the longest part of the contract, and the rule is simple. Everything specific, nothing general. You gotta list the SKU, the item description, sizes, materials, colors, artwork, and the unit price. Include the bill of materials or BOM, any designs, any special tooling, then lock in the total quantity ordered and the total amount in USD and RMB with the exchange rate. Also include the Incoterms. Is it FOB or EXW? Then payment terms. Is the order 30% deposit, 70% final balance, maybe 20-80? And write the deposit and balance as exact amounts, not percentages. If it is not written here in the contract, it is not owed to you. You gotta remember that. And now that you have defined exactly what you want, what happens when the factory gets it wrong? So the third part is a consequence. This is the part I used to leave out, and it is where the contract gets its leverage. The first consequence is poor workmanship. Production needs to match the pre-approved production sample or PAP, including the date it was approved. That PAP sample now becomes the benchmark for final inspection. Your inspector can compare final production to the PAP. If anything changed, it requires your approval before shipping out. And if defective goods leave the factory, the contract should already define the remedy. For example, what are your reimbursements? And are there any agreed shipping costs? In that way, you are not negotiating after the container has already landed in your country. So, in my contract, the delivery date means the goods have passed the final QC and AQL inspection. You see, I attach a consequences to this. If it's up to 5 days late, there's a 10% discount. 6 to 10 days late, a 20% discount. Beyond 10 days, well, I may withhold the balance unless the seller air freights the goods at its own cost. And on a 30-70 split, much of the factory's profits sits in that final balance. So the delivery date is not just a promise anymore. It has real weight, and that gives you negotiating power. What about the designs that you have paid to develop? So the fourth part is confidentiality. Your confidentiality clause should make 3 things crystal clear. 1, the factory cannot disclose your identity, your pricing, or order details. 2nd, they cannot display your samples or products without your permission in a showroom or at a trade show. And 3rd, they cannot bypass you and contact your customer directly. And you see, this is a clause that protects the work you pay to develop. Your artwork, your patterns, your customer list, well, without this clause, the factory is free to show your design to the next buyer who walks onto that floor. So, how do you know your contract is strong enough to send? Before you send the contract, you gotta make sure, does the contract reflect every agreement you made? Are the consequences specific and measurable? And has the seller stamped and acknowledged the complete agreement? If one of those pieces is missing, fix it first before you pay the deposit. Now, this is a part of the story I actually want you to remember because it is whether the whole framework either holds or falls apart. The goods from Frank had passed final inspection, arrived into Port of Spain, Trinidad. Then a carton of white shirts came out stained. Something had spilled and it slipped past factory inspection. I called Frank myself.
Is January 26, 10 days.
Okay.
Okay?
Yes.
You confirm?
Yes.
Okay.
Let's do it.
Okay, let's do it.
I opened the contract. I pointed at the page his own company had stamped. It said, replacement and shipping at the seller's expense. His words, his signature, not mine. Frank, he rushed the replacements, sent them express in time for the festival. And honestly, what moved him was not the fear of a lawsuit. Frank wanted next year's order, and a carton of stained shorts was never going to be worth losing that. You see, the contract did not win that argument, it ended it. And that is really the change I want you to walk away with here. A buyer thinks a contract is just for disputes, but a business owner uses a sales contract for leverage and to preserve alignment when something happens. Now you know the 4 parts of a China sales contract and how each one holds a factor accountable to what you agreed. But remember, a contract only works if the person on the other side can act on it. And acting on it comes from the factory owner. And choosing the right one follows its own set of steps. But this video here will walk you through exactly how I do it. And download the free worksheet in the description. It walks you through all 4 parts of the sales contract so you can build your own before you pay your next deposit.